Hello, and welcome to the virtual Scandinavia House with today's book talk, When the Cranes Fly South, with author Lisa Ridzén, excuse me. This is her debut novel and is the winner of the Swedish Book of the Year award. It is a powerful, sneaky, emotional meditation on life and death following an elderly man's attempt to mend a relationship with his son before it's too late. An emotional story of love, friendship, fatherhood, dogs, and atonement. It's published by Vintage Book, and the book is out now in bookstores near you. So, and a special thanks to Vintage for helping making this book talk possible. I will put a link in the chat function to where you can purchase the book, and you're more than welcome to ask questions to Lisa in the Q&A function. We will get to them towards the end of the discussion. This is being recorded and will be made available on our website, scandinavias.org, and our YouTube channel. Lisa is a doctoral student in sociology, researching masculine norms in rural communities of the Swedish far north, where she herself was raised and now lives in a small village outside of Östersund. The idea of her debut novel came from the discovery of notes her grandfather's care team had left the family as he neared the end of his life. Moderating today's talk is Kerry O'Donnell, and she is the communications and digital coordinator at Scandinavia House. In the past, she has worked for a variety of museums and cultural organizations, including the Museum of Modern Art, International Council of Museums, and the National Children's Museum, centering her practice on disability arts and literature. She lives in Brooklyn on unceded Lenape land. So please welcome Lisa and Kerry.
Thank you.
You think it's great to be here. Thank you so much, Lisa. First off, congratulations for all of the incredible accolades and well-deserved ones that Kyle just rattled off. I was thinking we could start with a quick reading from the book before we jumped in, just to get a sense of things, if that sounds okay to you.
That sounds definitely okay. And thank you for that beautiful introduction. Sorry, I was thinking I would just start by reading the first paragraphs of the book.
Perfect.
I fantasize about cutting him out of my will, making sure he doesn't get a penny. He claims it's as much for my sake as Sixten's that he wants to take him away. That old men like me shouldn't be trudging about in the woods, and that dogs like Sixten need longer walks than a quick stroll to the road and back. I look down at Sixten, who's curled up beside me on the daybed. He lets out a big yawn and gets himself comfortable with his head on my belly. I dig my swollen fingers into his coat and shake my head. What does that idiot know, anyway? There's no chance in hell I'm going to let him get his own way. At the kitchen table, Ingrid sighs. I can't promise anything, Bo, but I will do my best, because this isn't okay, she says, scribbling away in the carrier's logbook. I nod and give her a faint smile. If there's anyone who can help me with Sixten, it's Ingrid.
Thank you so much for just kind of easing us into that with the opening of the book. So you come from a background as a sociologist, a scholar. What's your origin story in writing fiction, and how do you balance these two kind of writing personas as a scholar, kind of more academic writer, and then also this really beautiful, lush prose that you can see like really flowing from When the Cranes Fly South?
Well, I actually started fiction writing maybe 7 or 8, 9 years ago. And I was at the moment, or at that time, I had my first, I spent a lot of time in bed because I was sick in rheumatism, and kind of just to have something to amuse myself, I started writing short sex scenes. The texts I wrote then were very different to When the Cranes Fly South, but it kind of sparked something within me, right? And at that time, I was also writing on my bachelor thesis, and so very academic writing. But I found that this fiction writing is definitely something that I wanted more of, and I continued writing a bit more, sometimes a bit less other times. And then, as you were saying in the introduction, when I found my granddad's old the notebook of my carers or my granddad's carers, I came up with the idea about Bo. So that's when I started writing When the Cranes Fly South. But yes, the two different ways, they're very different, these ways of writing. And when you write academically, I want to be very clear. I don't want it to be anything, I don't want the reader to be able or need to read between the lines. Everything should be very clear. Whereas when I write fiction, I'm writing for the heart, right? For the feelings, for the emotions, rather than the intellectual thinking. Um, and but at the same time, they're also very similar because I'm I usually describe myself as a man nerd, right? The most fun and interesting thing I know is to think about and contemplate about masculinity and boyhood and everything that's got to do with masculinity. So for me, these two different ways of writing are also, very similar. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we're at such a point as societally when masculinity kind of has this hyper focus on it. And we're really trying to recontextualize and see how boyhood and masculinity shapes these everyday perceptions. And you can really see that through these men that you wrote, through Bo, through Hans, through Tura. Um, and also, I kind of wanted to circle back to you first began writing when you had rheumatism, and you can really see in these like very visceral present tense moments with Fool the the aging process, the kind of pains of it. It feels very like lived in and very immediate, but without ever feeling like claustrophobic. And in that sense, like it's also most of it is set within like this daybed within like this very small world that he finds himself in with Sixten, like going as far as the meadow and coming back, and yet it travels so far in terms of his memory. So do you want to elaborate kind of on how you made this world feel lived in and also like very viscerally keeping to the parts of the aging process that you didn't want to shy away from?
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that it was important for me that the reader would feel like they were in Bo's body, right? That you would feel his feelings, but also his sensations, to feel like you were having his body. And I think that to go back to this situation when I had rheumatism and so rheumatism is a condition where you get a lot of inflammations in your body, right? So I had to spend a lot of time in bed and and that is of course different to aging, but there are some similarities, right? Where your body, you used to have this strong body, functional body, and it's just slowly been taken away from you. And that's something that I saw because I've worked in the elderly care myself, very similar to the ones in the book, Ingrid and the others. And I saw a lot of inspiration from what it feels like aging I got from that time. And something that really struck me when I worked with aging people, with elderly people, is that it creates a time for reflection, right? And you kind of because we call it the home service in Sweden, so it's a kind of care that everyone is entitled to towards the end of your life. And instead of going to a aging house or whatever, the caring people come home to you and look after you. And so when you work in the elderly care, you go into people's lives. You see their wives and their husbands and their dogs, their animals and kids and so on. So you get to know these people very well. And I'm also a very curious people, so I I ended up having very interesting discussions and talks, and you get to realize that this is not just an old person. This is a 5-year-old. This is a teenager who fell in love for the first time, or someone who was nervous going to his first job. It feels like I'm just babbling off. I don't know if I'm answering your questions now, but yeah. So. I forgot your question now.
Honestly, same here. So, but I absolutely like, and you could really see all of these kind of temporalities, all these different memories coexisting at once in the narrative, how it would be both like again on the daybed, but also, with Frederica for the first time, or with seeing Hans both as he is right now and as a child.
Mm.
And I thought that was a really um, incredibly like immersive way of structuring the narrative. So thanks so much for kind of letting us into your process a little bit there. I also wanted on kind of the terms of health. There's a lot of like these conflicting notions of masculinity that you can see that are developing throughout the novel. But there's also this sort of different one that you see Bo navigate with his friend Tura. So I wanted to see if you had any specific insights into how you structured this like great conflict versus Tura as kind of a release valve, and how Bo navigated that.
Yeah, so I guess this is from my sociological perspective, but I wanted to show how, because you could say that this is kind of a story of 3 generations of masculinity, right? And by that, I wanted to show how each individual, we are very shaped, and our possibilities, how to be and act and feel and talk and relate to each other, is very affected by social norms and the time where we live in. But I also wanted to show how different, like you said, different types of masculinities, different types of being a man, coexist at the same time. And in some ways, for instance, Bo, in relation to his dad, he becomes in one way, but in relation to Ture, he like flowers, and he becomes this giggly and fun and excited person. So by that, I wanted to show how we are our relationships, right? We become the people that we spend time with. And it's important to show, I think, or to remember that even if we can be emotionally constrained in relation to one person, another person might change their way within us, like Ture does for Bo. Yeah, I don't know if that was
No,
made
that was
sense, but
perfect.
yeah.
Yeah, and just kind of thinking about how these social norms shape us. There's a lot that you can kind of see reading through it, especially from like a person of my generation, where you look at, say, Bo's relationship with his father, and you kind of put a label on it as like, because we talk so openly about this nowadays, like
Mm.
trauma, words like Hans exhibits a lot of what people might call depression or anxiety. And we are so quick in this kind of age to stick a label on it. But Bo, as a narrator, doesn't have that exact kind of
Yeah,
perspective. So, how
yeah.
did you kind of place yourself in like showing these patterns and showing these things that we would make these immediate judgments about, but also kind of at a remove and with that kind of generational baggage and perspective from not necessarily your own generation, but from people you've interacted with?
Yeah, it's a bit hard to come up with just one answer. In some ways, I don't know. Bo just spoke through me. But I guess when I came up with Bo, I was inspired by men and boys that I've grown up with and that I have close to me. He's fiction, but I was very inspired by my granddad, my dad, my brother, and other men. And in some ways, I would say like Bo feels very real to me. Like
Mhm.
he's definitely alive to me. And yeah, I don't know really. I just felt like when I came up to when I came up with the whole story, like it came very quickly. So it just everything was just done, and Bo just talked, and I wrote down all the words that he said. But I also, because I was talking about Ture earlier, right? That Ture kind of enabled a more articulate Bo in some ways. But
Mhm.
there was a limit, right? I don't want to spoil anything, but there's something towards the end of the story that Bo finds out about Ture, and which makes him hesitate and get a bit self-critical and like, what was it in me that made Ture not feel comfortable to tell me about this? So even if Bo is very like open and so on with Ture, there's a limit to it, right? So like you said, maybe our generation is more articulate, and we have learned a different type of language than Bo and the older generation. And yeah, that had its consequences too for him, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really great to see these, again, these different sort of repressions and psychologies interacting with each other. And I think you developed that really richly. I want to talk about the kind of a lot of it on top of these characters, which are so incredibly formed, is like the setting. It seems like in some ways a love letter to Jämtland. Just these incredibly um, like beautifully written scenes about the setting and about like taking it from different points from Bo's particular immediate setting to his memories. And I wanted to ask, what was it like kind of translating these particularities from this this setting that you've been in all your life and you're so familiar with to a broader audience or even like across a translator, across languages?
Mm. I think that I didn't really have a choice because this is the place that I know something about, right? I know the smells of the different season changing and the houses where my characters live, they are houses of my family or friends. And so it would be really hard for me to write a story that took place in New York, for instance, or even Stockholm. I think that, yeah, I write about what feels familiar, right? And this is the culture I know, and these are the people and the landscape. And maybe, I don't know, maybe if you grow up and you live in the countryside very close to nature, and nature is a very like it's part of your everyday life, maybe it's become more important to be able to include that landscape or as a part of, so we are our relationships, but we are also the place where we come from, right? It's yeah, it means a lot. And like you said, it's a love letter to Jämtland. Yeah, I feel a lot of love for this place and the landscape and the animals and the culture here.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can, I mean, you can just so tell opening up to literally any page, you have that, again, feeling that you're there and ability to like work around the language. And again, even across translations or oceans or what have you, this feeling that you have for Jämtland and have shared with all of us. So thank you so
Yeah,
much. And
actually, it's made me really, sorry for interrupting you, but it's
no,
made me
please do.
really surprised because for me, this book is very local, right? Like you say, it's very Jämtland, and northern Sweden, the countryside. So that it's now been translated to so many different languages, is pretty, it's amazing. And like I totally love it, but it's also a bit like surprising. I was like, oh yeah, okay. He's got things to tell everyone, I guess, this bull.
Do you miss writing him? Do you feel like because he was so real to you, do you ever feel like you can strike up conversation with him again?
Yeah, I do talk to him now and then. Um, yeah. Yes, I do. I do grieve him a bit. But he was also, it's hard to talk about the book without spoiling things,
It is.
but yeah, I really like Bo. And in
I really
some
like him
ways,
too.
even if he's very different to my granddad in many ways, he looks exactly like my granddad did. And my granddad passed 15 years ago. And and some people say that, time heals all wounds and stuff, and you miss people less the longer time goes. But I think it's the opposite. Like, I would so like to talk to my granddad about, life and society and everything that is going on now and so on. So I think that's bullshit. I just miss him more and more.
Absolutely.
And
And
in
you
some
can see.
ways, Bo is like writing about Bo, I think was a bit of a dealing with that
Mhm.
yeah, feeling.
Yeah. So it was like it's a healing process for Bo himself as he's going through it, and also you. I
Yeah.
mean, it's incredibly beautiful. And you mentioned that, and I know in a lot of the novel, Bo comments kind of passively on, news of things that are changing generationally, whether I'm thinking of the portion where he hears a radio snippet about debating male contraception. Um, and his response is like, "Oh, everybody just talks about things so much these days." And there is this, like, I think, ideological element as well between his generation, and then there's also kind of he and Hans butt heads a little in Hans's youth over this kind of political contention. And now Hans later in the novel finds himself really dependent on like social democracy that he really balked in the form of the
Mm.
care system. So I just wanted to check if that was like something that you'd been really observing on the ground. Is this kind of generational, like ideological thing that's manifesting through these aging parents?
Yeah, definitely. And it's a bit like I was saying earlier that, that this is a story of three generations of masculinity, but it's also about, how the political system changes and what freedom means to you, right? For Bull, freedom is to, everyone unite together and we get a strong welfare system and more rights and so on. Whereas for Hans, freedom is something completely different. And this, I would say, is something I experience in general in Sweden, where a lot of us are very proud of the social democratic history that we have and that our grandparents and parents worked so hard for, and something that we're proud of. But at the same time, we are, slowly destroying that. And and I think that's another grief that I have. My granddad was a very proud um, social democrat, right? Like everyone was when he was young, with his background. So whereas now, it's changing and it's hard and it's complex and it's not only, changing in bad ways, but it's not like it used to be. And yeah, and it's strange times, not only in America, in many other places too at the moment. So in that sense, I'm happy that my granddad and Bo, who survived two world wars, don't have to experience this time, actually.
Yeah,
Oh, that sounded so sad and negative.
but
Um,
it's important to talk about, to kind of reveal that there is this grief, in
mm,
how things are changing, and how that this generation of Bo and your grandfather had these like incredibly strong ideals that they were uniting to make happen, and
yeah,
it's not
yeah, and I
necessarily
think
that same world.
Yeah, and so much is about this, like the idea of freedom. Like Bo's generation, his idea of freedom is when everyone is free, when we can be free together. Whereas it's a hyper individualized perspective for Hans's generation. And Bo can just not understand that. He's like, it's so hard for him to understand. Yeah.
Yeah. And I really, it seems like so much of this, like freedom and autonomy, they're kind of clashing notions of it. They really come to a head over Sixten, who is this like lightning rod for the book, without revealing too much. But where did you kind of approach that idea? Where did the kind of human animal relationship become the center of the book for you as Bo was talking to you?
Mm. So I grew up with dogs,
Yeah.
and I'm a person who prefers spend time with dogs rather than people. Um, I have a dog, a golden retriever called Possum, and she was definitely an inspiration for me when I came up with or created Sixten. But also, it's extremely common to have that kind of dog. The Sixten is an elkhound in this area, and a lot of people have them for hunting moose especially. But they're also family members, right? So I think it's a bit like with that question you had about place and write about the landscape and so on. Like it's hard for me not to write about. If I write about people, I need to write about dogs, right? Like um but it's also, especially for older people, and if you've lost your partner, for instance, an animal can be um your most important creature, right? Like for Bo, Sixten is his closest friend, companion at the moment because he's too old to go into town to see his best friend. And yes, his son comes and visit him, but um, it's Sixten who's his. And yeah, I wanted to show how what a dog can mean to someone, and also how this age with dignity, right? That's we want all our loved ones to age in the best possible way, but that is not so hard or not so easy to define, right? Is it to live as long as medically possible, or is it to be able to take your dog for walks with the risk that you might fall over, you might break a leg, but maybe it's worth it. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, and you see that coming up again with Hans and Bo's, because Bo would drift towards the I'm going to walk Sixten because that is what makes my life. Versus Hans is more of that, again, maybe individual minded. It is about, existing, it's about persisting. But I also
Yeah.
wanted to, you talked about the loss of a partner, talk about the form that the novel takes in also not only a love letter to Jonathan, but also like literal letters to Fredrika, um,
Mm.
Bo's wife, who is in a care facility. So it's all, I wondered how you kind of wanted to approach both like the day to day kind of diary confessional ideas of it, but also have it be addressed to Fredrika and weave in the memories. Did it always start out as this address to Fredrika?
Yeah, it did
Mhm.
actually. That's how I heard the way I heard Bo's voice, where he was talking to Fredrika. And I think so Fredrika she's got dementia and she can't remember Bo anymore. So he visits her now and then with Hans, but yeah, she can't remember them. So, but for Bo, Fredrika is still, very present in his everyday life. Like when you spend a whole life together with someone, you kind of grow together, right? And I wanted to show how even when our loved ones are gone, they're still with us, right? In our mind, the way we think and approach things. they're still there. Like with my granddad, for instance, I live in his house now, and it's been more than 15 years since he passed. But I think of him every day, you know, when I go out and collect the wood, or when I light a fire, or when I see certain things in the house that reminds me of him. And he's gone, but he's still here, right? And I wanted to investigate that, I think, by writing writing the novel from in this perspective. And I think that, I don't know how you experience this in the US, but in Sweden, Sweden has become a very secular society, right? And that means also, or a consequence of that is that we don't talk about death or dying that much. And I think that leaves an emptiness in us in some ways. And I think that, yeah, I think I was partly thinking about that as well, like, you know, kind of dealing with death and dying. Like, I grew up with very non-believing parents and a non-believing environment, but I never got the answers to, you know, what happens, where do they go, like how am I going to deal with the fact that my loved ones are gonna disappear and leave me, or like, you know, yeah. So I think it sounds like this book was like a therapy for me of dealing with death and the loss of my granddad. Like it wasn't that traumatic when I wrote it, but I've in hindsight I've gotten a lot of questions about, you know, how's your relationship to death and stuff like that. And once I've started thinking about these issues, I was like, yeah, maybe it's been a way of dealing with all of these aspects. Yeah.
Well, it absolutely resonates, you know. It's really something that, again, and you can see it in Vaud too, as the character of the priest coming in that sort of latter half of the novel. He's uh, again kind of searching for something eternal, whether it's through talking to Frederica or in like the comforts that the priest gives him in spite of him being a non-believer. So I think you really you got that across.
Mm.
That sort of, you know, underlying a, the search for the eternal in spite of life being so brief.
Mm.
It's lovely. Yeah. Let's see. I think I'm coming to about the end of my questions here. I did have one more, maybe a slightly lighter question, which is: have you ever seen the Storsio Beast that Tora talks about so much in the novel?
Oh yeah, the Storsjöodjuret. Yes, of course.
Yes.
Everyone who lives in Jämtland has seen that.
Oh, okay. Oh, good.
I've gotten a lot of questions from. I've got a 4-year-old daughter, and she's fully into the Storsjöodjur, the big lake monster. But the other day she was like, "Are you tricking, Mama? Are you tricking? Does he exist?" And I was like, "Of course he does."
He does. Okay, well, thank you so much for this conversation. It was so, so lovely. I think I might see if there's any questions in the chat.
So far, there's
Uh,
no questions.
so far, there's no questions.
Maybe I have one.
Yeah.
Could you tell us what you're working on next, if possible?
Sorry, I'm working on a novel that is set in the same environment as the cranes, but this time I'm focusing on some younger people. So, the main character is a 30-year-old or around 30, and he's dreaming of creating a family with his partner, but they face some challenges.
Ooh.
And the story is also about the longing for family or creating a family, but also how mental illness can go through generations, how you can basically inherit mental illness and so on. So, and there will be a lot of dogs as well, more dogs than in the cranes.
Have you found it difficult to kind of transition your writing voice from both talking to you from like a very particular generational standpoint to now suddenly like 30-year-old, completely different part of life?
No, not really. It kind of happened in the same way that this Patrick is the name of the main character. And he just, appeared. And I think that when I write fiction, I pretend or like, I feel like I am the person um, that I'm writing from. That's their perspective. So, no, no, I don't think I just go with the flow.
And I have another there's some questions that came in from the Q&A. But I was also curious about working with the translator. Since we are in the US, we're more than likely reading the English or the American translation. So how was it working with Alice? Is it Alice Menzie? Is that her name?
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah,
How
I
was the
think she's
process with that?
It was very fun and interesting. The first time I read like the first drafts in English, I got a bit surprised because I was like, oh wow, because Bo doesn't speak English at all. He doesn't know English. So I was like, oh, this is so weird. But after a while, I got into it, and it's been very interesting listening to the audiobook as well. Um, but I was also a bit, I thought of how is she gonna manage to translate the locality of it, or like because there's some indigenous Sami words and some very particular words from this area, like the dialect and so on. But I think she did an amazing job. Like I really liked it, and the process been basically she's been emailing me with some questions now and then. But yeah, and I've read through it, and yeah.
So we have a couple of questions from MG. They're interested in if you could talk about your writing process. Do you write every day? How long did it take for you to write this novel?
So this novel, I came up with the idea when I was pregnant with my daughter, and she was born in May, and I started writing like a couple of weeks before she was born, and then I wrote the main story, most of the book over the summer, her first summer, because she slept for 1.5 hours every morning, between 6 and 7:30, and that's when I wrote. And I think that having that pressure was quite important, because then I couldn't hesitate or think about anything. I just sat down and I was bored for 1.5 hours, and then she woke up and I took off and breastfed and and left the ball. So I wrote most of it during a period of 4 months, and then I attended a writing school in Stockholm. And so I went down there once a month. So I brought my partner and my baby, and my partner walked up and down the streets of Stockholm and then popped into the school, and I breastfed, and then he kept walking outside. And that was 5 months, that course. And yeah, so about that time, yeah.
That looks it for questions right now. I don't see any more, but Lisa Marie thanks you for this interesting talk, and she can't wait to read it. But thank you, Lisa, for joining us today, and thank you so much, Kerry, for moderating. And thank you, audience, for joining in. We have another virtual talk tomorrow. It's an Icelandic book on Icelandic intuition that also starts at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So again, visit Scandinavia.org for everything that we have on offer. We have a lot of literature events in person, and we'll continue to do literature events online as well. So thank you everyone for joining, and thank you again, Lisa and Kerry. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.